It's Friday the 21st of February. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and today we're going to resume our discussion on crosswind landings thanks to some exclusive in the cockpit video footage of a great example of a crosswind landing in a 737NG from a low-cost carrier in Europe. This footage comes from us exclusively from Bernhard in Austria, who operates a 737NGs in the right seat for a low-cost carrier in Europe. And he has a YouTube channel called 1000 Landings. I'll put the link down below. And he says we can use his footage today and our discussion of crosswind landings for the shout-out to his video channel. So go check out 1000 Landings. And what Bernhard does is, and what's legal apparently over there in Europe, here in the States it's against company policy for us to film from inside the cockpit, so we can't. But they can over in Europe. And what Bernhard does is takes his cell phone and hard mounts it onto the window by his seat. Bernhard's a first officer in the right seat, so the camera is mounted on the right window, looking forward with a great view of the runway and a partial view of the instrument panel and flight controls. Remember, on our previous discussion we discussed how we want to get the aircraft lined up with the runway just as we flare, and in this aircraft you're going to see it in action from the cockpit and see just how quick all this takes to come together. And on the 737, remember too, the crosswind limit, how much crosswind you can handle, is somewhat limited by the low-slung engines, and that's part of the reason why the 737 has those flat bottoms on the 737 engines, because when you're doing your wing low, after you round out, you're getting very close to scraping those engines. This is a great example in this video because everything is getting very close to the limits. He's getting close to the crosswind limits for a wet runway, and the runway is relatively short at only 6,598 feet. This footage will be shown from the approach and landing into Bristol Airport in the UK, runway 27, with the winds 190 at 26, gusting to 32. So that's pretty much a direct crosswind. So since this will be a left to right crosswind and the camera's here in the right seat, when Bernhard breaks out of the weather, remember we're crabbing into the wind. When you break out of the weather, you look straight ahead. There's no runway out there straight ahead. The runway's off to your right here. You got to look well off to your right to find the runway. This is why you don't want to immediately come off the instruments and transition visual as soon as you break out. You want to take a peek, maybe have the other pilot tell you you're breaking out, but then get right back on the instruments to maintain that stabilized approach so that you don't immediately say, oh, there's the runway, and make a bid for it, and then just get drifted right off course. So when Bernhard breaks out of the weather, with the camera mounted here, you're going to be looking right at the window post for the right window, and the runway is obscured behind this window post. Not until he does his D-crab maneuver to round out and flare do you really see the runway in front of you from this camera angle view. So what I want to do initially is just roll the tape and check out how this looks from the cockpit, and then we'll back up and I'll give you a step-by-step breakdown of all the steps involved and all the instruments that they're paying attention to, and all the different bells and ringers that you're going to hear as this aircraft lands at Bristol Airport on a very windy, blustery, rainy day.
$1,000.
Approaching 1,900 meters available.
600. Minimums. $50, $40, $30, $20, $10.
Did you see how the captain didn't take the crab out until just prior to landing, just prior to touchdown, even though he landed a little bit left of center line? Now let's break this down a little further, starting with the instrument approach plate, and open your doors of perception. The crew is using this NDB ILS runway 27 approach to the Bristol airport, and all of this would have been briefed ahead of time. And they know they're getting close to some of the limits for crosswind and runway length, and have planned accordingly. So the published minimums they've set for this approach are 801 feet in the barometric altimeter, that's 200 feet in the radio altimeter, 750 meters RVR. They've got the weather for the approach, and they'll be using the precision approach guidance, which will give them about a 3-degree glide path to the runway. Once they break out of the weather, they'll have the following lighting system to help visually guide them into the runway. For runway 27, a high-intensity runway light system, centerline lightings, high-intensity approach lighting system, touchdown zone lights. And ball note 2 says there'll be a PAPI on the left at also a 3-degree angle. So a visual glide slope guidance. So the 737 is one of the noisiest cockpits in the industry, and even more noisy is the windshield wipers.
1,000.
That's the automatic 1,000-foot call out based on the radar altimeter, followed by the sound of the captain running the stabilizer trim.
Approaching 27, 1,900 meters available.
That's the new runway awareness and advisory system, reminding you which runway you're approaching and the runway available in meters, followed by the sound of more stabilizer trim. That's the autopilot disconnect warning horn, brought to you by that accident years and years ago in the Everglades when the crew accidentally turned off the autopilot and nobody noticed it. Plus 100 means 100 feet above minimums, or in this case 300 feet above the ground.
Minimums.
Minimums is what they set based on the approach plate, and if in the event they didn't see the runway at this point, they'd have to go around. Next, you're going to hear the automatic radar altimeter callouts from 50 down to 10 feet.
40, 30,
The cadence
20,
of these callouts is
10.
critical to a good landing. Next, you can hear the wheels spool up and the ground spoiler lever automatically move to the fully deployed position.
900 meters.
The RAWS system reporting 900 meters, which corresponds to the red and white alternating centerline runway lights indicating 3,000 feet remaining, or about 900 meters. If you approach the end of the runway at too fast of a ground speed, the RAWS will issue additional warnings.
300 remaining.
At 300 meters, or about 1,000 feet, the runway centerline lights transition to solid red. Now that we know what all the very important noises mean, let's go back and review some of the instruments and warning lights and some of the techniques that these guys used to ensure that they landed safely out of this approach. Okay, welcome to the office. It's the captain's landing, and right now his world is focused right over here on the ADI. But before we focus on that, let's show you around the office here a little bit. This crew has elected to do a flaps 30, there's the flap indicator, a flaps 30 landing as opposed to a full flap 40 because of the gusty winds. And they've also elected right here to select the auto brakes to maximum. Out of 4 different settings, that's the maximum automatic brake setting. Here on the engines, they are being run by the auto throttle as indicated here. The autopilot is engaged as indicated here. And the localizer glide slope is being flown as indicated here. And this also is telling you that command or the autopilot is on. The landing gear is down with 3 green lights. The flaps are set. Final approach checklists are complete. Now here on the ADI is the airspeed over here on the left. Note on the lower airspeed end, red line indicating stall speed and red line above indicating flap limit speed at flaps 30. So the crew has a very narrow window of opportunity to operate, with approach speed being set right here. -0 and +20 on the approach speed. Over here is the altimeter winding down to minimums. Over here is the vertical speed indicator. Right here is the radar altimeter. And here is what the pilot is focused on right now. The crosshairs or the flight directors, which are telling him how to fly the aircraft to maintain this raw data, localizer and glide slope, the little purple diamonds right here and here, to maintain this precision approach guidance. Now let's put all this into motion. There's the 1,000-foot call out. There's the sound of the elevator trim. These lights are only flashing because of video anomalies.
Approaching 27, 1,900 meters available.
There's the RAWs information on the runway. Runway 27 with the available runway. Look how hard he's working to maintain that perfect approach guidance. In order to maintain this approach guidance, he's got to remain crabbed into the wind. He's broke out of the weather. Now he's hand flying the aircraft. The autopilot is disconnected. You see this light changed here from command to flight director. He's 100 feet above minimums. Just now transitioning to outside, and look now, he's sliding slightly below glide path intentionally. We're going from white to red to almost all red because he wants to nail the end of this runway and not land long.
40, 30, 20, 10.
Normally you want to cross over the threshold at 50 feet, but these guys wanted to slide slightly below glide path to hit the end of the runway at 30 feet. Now he's slightly left of the center line. He's got it straightened out. He's working his way back towards center line. Auto brakes are off right there.
100 meters remaining.
There's the runway remaining amount. That's usually a call out by the co-pilot. I don't think we can hear the interphone conversation between the pilots.
100 remaining.
Now you can start to hear him. Now let me back this up a second and show you just how quick this aircraft decelerated.
300.
50, 40,
There's approach speed.
20, 10.
On approach speed. Boom, on the ground, auto brakes max. Look at that speed decay. Look at that drop. Of course, he's got full reverse.
900 meters remaining.
Auto brakes are off now. And he's manually coming to a brake to avoid throwing everybody against the bulkheads with the hard braking that maximum auto brakes will give you towards the end of the rollout. but he's at a reasonable speed, so the RAS system is not yelling at him. And clear at the end of the runway.
30 meters remaining.
Resetting the flaps, resetting the trim. That's what runaway trim sounds like. That's the big trim wheel spinning round and round and round and round as Bernhard resets that trim there on his thumb switch. Auto brakes off. Reset the master warning light for future warning indications. So now that you've seen some of the sights and sounds of what it's like to land a 737 in a gusty crosswind, and you might feel yourself YouTube qualified at this point, but until you've done this actually in the simulator, or better yet in the actual aircraft, you cannot begin to get a feel, an understanding for what this all feels like, how to put all this training together to get that done. And as you can see just how quickly all that has to come together, and very accurately too. So thanks so much, Bernhard, for getting this to us there at 1000 Landings. Check out his YouTube channel. He just posts all of his landings at all these different airports, and this is a great training aid too for new pilots that are getting into the flying there in the UK to see what actual conditions at actual runways all throughout Europe, what the conditions are and what it's like to land at these different airports. So it's a great training aid as well. This video, however, is not a training video. This is just to give you a little background and better understanding of crosswind landings in the big jets. Thanks for watching. We'll see you here.
Approaching 271,900 meters available.